Welcome. My name is Ariana, and this is a webinar for extra credit on how to lead like the Greeks. I'm going to take you through a section of Lead 101 on assimilation and alienation, which is something that we always talk to our students about when they're leading a chapter ministry in their fraternity or sorority. I hope you guys have a great time. I want to start with a few questions. What does it look like to bring your faith and your friends together? And if you're a Greek student watching this extra credit, what does it look like to be fully Greek and fully Christian? To really investigate those questions, we need to frame them. And of course, it's InterVarsity, so we're going to frame it with scripture. Take a moment to pause this video and look at Mark 2:13 through 17, and then we'll pick back up. If you really want to go deep, take a chance to creatively enter the text in Mark 2:13 through 17. Imagine that you're Levi in the story, throwing a large dinner party. Think about your guests, think about who would be there, and why don't you make a seating arrangement chart? Who would you put next to who? Why? Now that you've had a chance to read the text and creatively enter it, thinking about who you would invite to the dinner party, it's time to ask some questions and think critically about what we've just read. Of all the people, why would Jesus ask Levi to follow him? It's true, Jesus' actions here are shocking. Religious leaders sometimes invited others to follow them as their student or apprentice, but it was a huge honor. They typically reserved their invitations for respected and morally qualified people. Yet here we see Jesus, a very popular religious leader, inviting Levi, a notoriously corrupt tax collector, to follow him. The crowd following Jesus would probably be shocked, confused, or intrigued, yet none more so than Levi himself, who was faced with a critical decision. Do I continue to follow my cush, corrupt lifestyle I've been living, or do I leave it all to follow Jesus? In that moment, Levi gets up, he leaves everything, and he follows Jesus. That sets scene 2, or question 2. In question 2, we come to, why do the Pharisees care about Jesus eating with tax collectors and sinners? Well, if Jesus' actions were shocking in scene 1, Levi definitely follows suit here. He leaves a lifestyle of a tax collector, greed, selfishness, exploiting others. Yet he doesn't leave his friends. He doesn't cut them off or distance himself. In fact, he does the exact opposite by bringing his friends and Jesus together by throwing a party. We like to joke about Levi in Greek IB. We like to say he was the brattiest disciple. He was eating, drinking, dancing, and where do we see Jesus in the midst of this motley mixer? Right in the middle of it, literally fraternizing with the people he should be avoiding. He's a religious leader, right? Why would any legitimate, self-respecting religious leader associate with these people? Which brings us to scene 3 and Jesus' response. Who are the sick and righteous Jesus is referring to? What is Jesus trying to communicate here? In this party, we find two very different groups of people, the Pharisees and the tax collectors. Where do we see the Pharisees at this party? They're on the outside, looking in. They believe that their moral living makes them more acceptable to God, which turns them off to those living a broken lifestyle. They have separated themselves from spiritually sick people, like the tax collectors and the sinners, out of a desire to persevere and to preserve their sense of morality and spiritual health. But in doing so, they've alienated themselves from the culture. The same is true for us as Greeks. Some of us, in our desire to follow Jesus, have either accidentally or intentionally alienated ourselves from our brothers and sisters. So this is what you can learn from us. We run the risk of becoming ghost brothers and sisters in our chapters when we call ourselves Christians but never hang out at the parties and social gatherings. While we might enjoy a cush connection with God, free from the temptations of Greek life, it's more important that we're with our brothers and sisters, or we lose the ability to influence them. Now, let's talk about those tax collectors. They're losing credibility. They resemble and perpetuate the broken lives of those around them, lumped in with the sinners who believe you should live how you want regardless of what God thinks. Simply live like everyone else does, but in doing so, they distance themselves from God. The tax collectors have assimilated into the broken culture. The same is true for us as Greeks. Some of us, in our desire to fit in and find joy outside of Jesus, have assimilated to the Greek lifestyle, and we run the risk of becoming nominal Christians. While we might enjoy a close connection with our brothers and sisters by losing our credibility as Christians, we also lose our ability to influence our brothers and sisters, which really hurts our witness. So here's the thing. There's got to be a middle, right? And you're right. It's incarnation. How do we live like Jesus in the social groups that we have so that we can best influence others for the kingdom? There's a third person at the party, and that's Jesus. Jesus is a well-known religious leader. He has a close connection with God, but where do we find him? Not on the outside with the Pharisees, which would be expected, but he's inside with the tax collectors. We also know that Jesus lived a perfect life, which means he wasn't living how everyone else was. Jesus is neither alienated nor assimilated to the culture. He lives in close connection with those who need God without losing his credibility as a man of God. This is what we call incarnation. Living in close connection with those who need God without losing our credibility as the people of God. When Jesus invites Levi to follow him, it's neither to remain a tax collector nor to become a Pharisee, but to become like him, like Jesus. This is what it looks like to follow Christ. The same is true for us as Greeks or Christians. When Jesus invites us to follow him, it's neither to assimilate nor to alienate, but to incarnate. It's neither to be Greek or Christian. It's to be Greek and Christian. Remember when I asked you what would it look like to bring our faith and our friends together? This is it, you guys. To live incarnationally. So now let's talk about what we need to develop to move from assimilation to incarnation, and what we need to develop to move from alienation to incarnation. You guys are doing great. Leadership is first and foremost a lifestyle, friends. Before your brothers or sisters or friends on campus ever look at the Bible, they're going to look at you and the way you live. They're going to look at the way that you act at parties, the way that you spend time with your boyfriend or girlfriend, and they're going to listen to the way that you talk about other people and yourself. And the implicit question they're asking is, what difference does Jesus make? When you announce that you're starting a Bible study or a small group, you're going to become the Jesus guy or the Jesus girl. When you become the Jesus guy or the Jesus girl, they're going to look at you as the example of what it looks like to follow Jesus. But if they look at you and they don't see any difference between you and them, that's assimilation. They're not going to care about Jesus, because what difference does he make? Conversely, if they look at you and the only difference they see is that you don't have the time for them, or even worse, you're too good for them, you're alienating them, they're not going to want anything to do with Jesus. Yet, there's a third place. If they look at you and you're in close connection with them while pursuing Christ and his character, then they may wonder if there's something more to Jesus. So how do we live this lifestyle? It starts with experiencing Jesus' healing for ourselves. The reality is that the tax collectors and the Pharisees are both sick, and yet Jesus invites them both towards healing in different ways. For those of us who are alienated like the Pharisee, Jesus invites us to follow him by developing a Christ-like compassion for those who need God. In doing so, we begin to gain a greater sense of connection with our brothers and sisters without losing our credibility. And for those of us who are assimilated like the tax collectors, Jesus invites us to follow him by developing a Christ-like character that leads us to spiritual health. And in doing so, we begin to gain a greater sense of credibility without losing our close connections with our brothers and sisters, or our friends. I want you to take some time, pause the video, and think about what you need. Do you need to create Christ-like compassion or Christ-like character? Once you've come up with what you think Jesus is inviting you into, write it down and text a friend who can hold you accountable this semester. I hope you guys have the best semester. Thank you all for diving in and learning how to lead from the Greek students. This is something that we love to talk about. We love to talk about being fully in the party and fully following God. It's a wild ride, friends, but Christ has already done it.